Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my February 2021 reading wrap-up. If you're not already aware, I do weekly entertainment wrap-ups of everything I read, watch, and listen to, but today we're just talking about the books. There's a chance there will be some background sound because there's this annoying remote-controlled car that somebody drives around my neighborhood that is like 10 times louder than an actual car. I think they've stopped for the day, but we'll find out. I'm waiting for my workday to be over so I can film my monthly wrap-up, but there's this person making weird sounds in the neighborhood who just won't stop. It sounds like a lawnmower or a weed whacker, but I think it's that annoying car. Why? During February, I was participating in Valentine's Demonathon, and I was low-key prioritizing books for Blackathon as well. As always, I'm going to start with the nerdy hardcore stats and charts, and then get into what I read. In February, I read a total of 21 books and one short story for a total of 7,337 pages. That takes into account converting audiobook minutes to pages, so 4,591 of those pages were actually about 142 hours of audio. I blame Demonathon. The age breakdown for these books was 12 adult reads and 10 YA books. I read 17 novels, 2 anthologies, 1 novella, 1 graphic novel, and 1 short story. This month, the biggest chunk of what I read was technically fantasy, but as you can see, I read several different genres. I show the genre by page count mostly out of habit and because it helps us understand how much I can take of genres I don't usually read. Just over half of these books were from the library, but I also read from my own shelves, NetGalley, and books from a publisher. The free item was a short story available on the Tor website. I read 11 audiobooks, 4 ebooks, 4 paperbacks, 2 hardcovers, and 1 aforementioned web story. About half of these books were in my usual 300 to 399 pages range, and everything was published in the last decade or so. The majority of these were by female authors, but half of them had female protagonists. In the case of not applicable, those would be non-fiction or poetry books where there isn't a central protagonist. In terms of setting, half these books were set in the United States, but I did have reads set in the UK, Canada, and other worlds. In terms of diversity, I think this was the first month where every single read had at least one diversity marker, with just over a quarter having been intersectional. In terms of star ratings, this month I had 1 2.5 star read, 1 3-star book, 2 3.5 star books, 11 4-star books, 1 4.5 star book, and 6 5-star books. Let's start with the lowest rated read and work our way up to the highest, shall we? My 2.5 star read was Hello Moto, which was my short story that I read particularly for Demonathon this month. This was available for free on the Tor website, and although it had an interesting premise, it was just way too short, and I know that's the curse of short fiction. You're going to want more, and if it's done really, really well, you're satisfied even though you want more, but with this, it was just kind of like, and what is happening now? My 3-star read was an unfinished arc of Pixels of You. Although this had a couple of pages that would show you what the art would eventually look like throughout the entire volume, most of this was rough sketches, so it actually took me a lot of brain power to try to make sure that I was understanding what was going on in this book. This is set in a future where not only do AI exist, but they exist in humanoid bodies, and this is a rivalry between 2 different photographers, one who is human and one who is AI. Again, because the art was unfinished, I'm not entirely sure if this was a rivals to friends to lovers or just a rivals to friends story. My first 3.5 star book was Plain Bad Heroines. This was a very, very long one, and it had a few different timelines to it. We start out with this case of this woman who is going to meet her lover in the forest near her boarding school, and something happens and tragically they both die. Flash forward and there is a movie being made out of a book about this incident. In addition to those perspectives, we have a perspective that is kind of in between. It's just after the people have died, and it has to do with the woman who is running the boarding school. This book had elements that were creepy and atmospheric. I liked the parallels between 3 girls and 3 girls and 3 girls that kept happening throughout this narrative, which also reminded me that standing around in groups of 3 in the forest naked is such a big thing in art history. I also really ended up liking the current day timeline because of what was happening with filming that movie and the kind of creepiness of the filming behind the scenes scenes of that movie. I'm not going to give away exactly what was happening, but I thought that that was an interesting take on making a movie. Next we have the last book that I finished in February, and that's And Now She's Gone. This is a mystery thriller about this woman who works as a private detective. She's actually just been given her first missing persons case and she's working on it, but she's not too pleased with the person that she has to work for. She has a past, as you will find out through this story, as to why she is working for this person and doing this type of job, and you keep seeing these flashbacks to her previous life. And that previous life not only starts to threaten her current life, but she is also having a lot of problems with the case she is currently working. She's trying to figure out if this woman just left because she doesn't want to be with the boyfriend anymore, or if she left because he was abusing her. And because he is the client, she needs to be really certain about whether or not to give him information on this woman. I found this fun and intriguing. There was a really cool reveal about 5 minutes before the book even ended, which I really appreciated. If you're into a mystery thriller type of thing, this is a good one to pick up. On to my 4-star reads, the first one being a poetry book called Black Matters. This is a poetry book that also has art in the form of photography from places around the world, and some of the poems are actually based on the photography. This is a really quick volume from Fernwood Publishing. It came out last year. I very much enjoyed it, so if you are into poetry, it's something to pick up, but as we all know, I'm not the most eloquent when talking about poetry, so that's about all I can say about it. From the same publisher, I also read About Canada Disability Rights. This is a very small, very dense book about the state of disability rights in Canada. As you may or may not know, it is kind of disjointed across Canada as to what the rights are and if there are councils within the province or territory that deal specifically with disability rights. There are also weird rules here and there. For example, I believe it's in Manitoba. If you need a wheelchair, the province will provide you with a wheelchair, but if you decide to move out of that province, you have to give your wheelchair back. This was a great primer. It was published last year, so it's up-to-date information, and it's something I will probably refer back to. Next, we have 2 books that form a duology, and because I can't really talk about the second book without talking about the first book, I'm just going to talk about them together because they were both 4-star reads. That duology is Of Fire and Stars and Of Ice and Shadows. In both of these books we have 2 protagonists. They are both princesses. One is coming to the other's kingdom to marry her brother because there isn't a political alliance thing going on, but the princesses end up falling in love with each other. This is a world that has magic, but in this specific kingdom, magic is looked down upon and is actually illegal, which is not great because the princess that is just coming here happens to have some that she's been kind of pushing down for her entire life because it's not appropriate. As you might guess, this causes some complications, not to mention the fact that she falls in love with her intended sister. I did really enjoy this duology. The one problem I had with the second book is the 2 characters end up being separated for a very long time, and because the romance in the first book was so much of the first book, I kind of missed that in the second book. That being said, it was fun. There were a lot of really intriguing characters throughout. I really liked how the magic worked. I really liked her trying to figure out how her magic worked. It was a cute, fun adventure. Next we have Faith Taking Flight by Julie Murphy. This is a novelization about the comic book hero Faith, or Zephyr as her superhero name comes to be, although I think that's just mentioned at the very end of this because this is her origin story. Essentially, Faith is meant to be hanging out with her 2 best friends one summer, but they actually end up going off on this trip and they can't bring her because of reasons that are explained. So she ends up meeting up with this guy that she plays an online game with, and he convinces her to go away to this camp where she can learn about whether or not she might have superhero powers. I don't want to spoil it for you, but some bad things happen and she is returned to her normal civilian life, but she now has some powers and she doesn't really know if she can tell anybody about them. On top of that, she's trying to figure out what her sexuality is, and she ends up having a crush on a boy at her school and a girl that she is going to meet, and I'm not going to wreck it for you because also spoilers on that. I felt like the love triangle was handled fairly well. It's not something I go looking for, but when it's there and it's done in a non-annoying, non-cheating way, I enjoy it. Not to mention I love these comics, so I was very happy to see the origin story of this character. Next we have The Devil in Silver by Victor LaValle. This is the second of 2 books by his that I read this month. The other one I rated a little bit higher, which is why it's further on in this list. This one is about a man named Pepper who is being taken to a psychiatric facility by these 3 plainclothes cops who kind of jumped him in the street. He didn't know they were cops, he fought back, and now they are throwing him in the psych unit so they don't have to do overtime paperwork. This book is very much about how we treat people who are in psychiatric units and the terrible things that they can go through, but then it also has this air of maybe having a supernatural element to it, and that's something that you don't really know if it's there or not because obviously drugs and medication are in play and people in the psych unit are there for a reason, usually. In the afterword, the author talks about how he wrote this in a very frenzied way, kind of in coffee shops in these very short bursts of time, because his partner recently had a baby, so they would only get 2 hours to themselves each day to sit down and do their work to try to get it in by deadline, and I found that really fascinating. Next we have How to Catch a Queen by Alyssa Cole, which is the first in the Runaway Royals series, which is a spin-off to the Reluctant Royals series. I thought originally that this was going to be a prequel to that series, but it actually runs in conjunction with, so you will see some crossover with characters in the background that you previously know if you read the other series. From a very young age, our main character decided that she was going to grow up to be a queen, not because she wanted to wear fancy dresses and be a princess, but because she actually wanted the job of being a queen. She lands herself in a political marriage, but she finds out that the kingdom that she's in firstly has marriage trials, so it's not even for certain that she's going to be the queen long term, because after 4 months they could just get rid of her. And secondly, queens in this land don't actually have any power. Meanwhile, her husband is kind of floundering. He's only king because his father passed away and he was actually thinking about running away from this position, and now he's stuck in it and he doesn't know if he's doing a good job. And his advisor is basically running the country, and anytime he speaks up about what he wants to do as king, the advisor beats him back down like a second father. I thought this was a really strong start to the series. There was only one thing that kind of bothered me, which was in the society, it's totally fine if a man has a husband and a wife at the same time, which is cool. That's not what bothered me. It bothered me that that exists in the same place where women are looked down upon to the degree that they're looked down upon. They're not given any say in their government or anything like that in this society. So it's weird that it would be so accepting of polyamorous relationships and queer relationships, but not accepting of women in general. That's just a little nitpicking thing. I'm really excited for the next book in this series because I'm pretty sure it's sapphic. Also, Alyssa Cole has a newsletter. If you didn't know about it, you should subscribe to it, because the other day she sent us a short story that she wrote, typos and all, and it was just a lot of fun. My next book is an arc that is coming out at the beginning of April, and that's The Outrage by William Hussey. This is set in a futuristic England where being queer has been delegalized, so it is illegal to be queer. You are called a degenerate or a degen. And there are these people that go around specifically doing filth checks to find out if they can find people that are queer or people that might have questionable history in their background. They've also kicked out basically anyone who's not white from the society. And they like to say they sent them back to their homelands, but it's pretty well established that there are a lot of mass graves around England at this point. With that premise, it's obvious that there's going to be homophobia, there's also racism and ableism, there's also mentions of torture both on the page and off, so it is very heavy to read. However, it's also a beautiful story of resistance and hope, and I just felt so many feels while reading this. I couldn't put it down. I read it within a couple of days and just sped right through it. Additionally, I did find an Easter egg for William's other book, Hideous Beauty, in it, which was very nice to see. I actually messaged him and was like, wait, you did this on purpose, right? Because that's wonderful. It was just a little ray of hope in all of this darkness. This book also has a lot to do with queer cinema and knowing your history and knowing that you have to continuously fight for your rights because there will always be people that want to take them away from you. I also read Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, which is named after a blog post that the author wrote back in 2014 and then eventually became this book. This is an anti-racism book set in the UK, so it's talking more about the system there and the anti-blackness that people there face. There are also elements of pop culture brought into this, so back when The Cursed Child was becoming a thing and a black actress was cast as Hermione and that whole uproar that happened, that is discussed for a while, especially because reading Hermione as black in the original story completely changes it. And this is one of the 2 books I read this month where I read on the page the name of somebody I had actually met in person before, so that was a little bit weird. And both of those people I know from doing YouTube. In particular, this one referenced Rosanna Halse-Rojas, so I'll link her down below. My final 4-star read was The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. This is a powerful science fantasy book about these people who basically make up the souls that are New York. Once a city becomes old enough and kind of experienced enough and established enough on the earth, eventually it has a soul. However, New York is so big that it has a soul for each of the 5 boroughs and then a soul for just basically New York as itself, and this comes with some powers. This isn't a position that people apply for, just one day they wake up and suddenly they are that borough or they are New York. This book was incredibly fast-paced, and what I really loved about it is it didn't spend a lot of time wasting the "no, you're actually the chosen one" discussions. People just kind of knew these things about themselves, and then another city was helping them out as to figuring out what they need to do now. Because not only have these people become the city, but they are also under attack. This was incredibly imaginative, which is absolutely no surprise if you've read any N.K. Jemisin, and I'm really looking forward to what happens next with this series. The 4.5 star book I read this month was The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune. This was my first of his works, and I really enjoyed it. Our main character is a very hyperactive boy who really loves writing fan fiction about his favorite superhero. In this world, superheroes actually exist in the real world, but they are called extraordinaries instead of superheroes. And he writes the longest running self-insert fan fiction about the superhero that he just idolizes. Outside of this, he also has a group of queer friends. He has a dad who really loves him, and his mother recently passed away, so there's a lot of grief and issues to do with that. This character is the epitome of an awkward teenager, and I just love seeing that throughout this book. It was also narrated beautifully, so if you have the chance to listen to the audiobook, I definitely would, because it just brought the awkwardness out so well. This is also the first in a series, and I am really looking forward to seeing what else happens, because I just really enjoyed this one. On to my 5-star reads, the first one being Disability Visibility, edited by Alice Wong. This is the other book where I saw the name of somebody I know on the page, which wasn't completely surprising because the name I saw was Annie Sagara, or Annie Elaney. I will also link her channel down below, and she is a disability advocate. If you've never checked out her videos before, please do so. Also follow her on Instagram and TikTok if you have that, because she puts out a lot of information that not everybody knows about living with disabilities. This was a collection of essays by disabled authors about disabilities, and it's just definitely worth picking up. I'm trying to read at least 12 books about disabilities this year. I've already read a couple of this month. I read at least one last month. And then, of course, Disability Readathon is happening in April, so make sure to check that out. I'll link their website down below. They just recently posted their challenges. Next, we have White Rabbit, which is a YA mystery thriller that gets really gory at points, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. We start out this book with our protagonist, and his ex-boyfriend has shown up at the party that he's at, and he doesn't know how to feel about this fact that they're about to have a conversation, apparently, because the boyfriend just basically ghosted him, and he's been having some really bad feelings about this, and he's been working out, so hopefully the guy will be jealous of his new physique and that type of thing. And right in the middle of whether or not they're going to have this discussion, he gets a phone call from his half-sister. They didn't grow up together. There's a lot of animosity between his mother and his father, because his father actually cheated on the father's wife with his mother, so that's how that happened. And there's not really a bond between these half-siblings because the father doesn't want there to be. However, his half-sister hasn't been the worst person in the world in the past, and she calls him for help, so he leaves to do that. And it goes from there. This whole story takes place in one night. It's very twisty, it's very turny. I thoroughly enjoyed it, obviously, because it's so near to the end of this list. Next, we have Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas, which is the prequel to The Hate U Give, so it's number 0 in that series. This is also more a companion series than a direct series, but this follows Star's father, Maverick, when he is 17 years old and finds out that he is a father. Due to some circumstances, he ended up having a one-night stand with this woman. The condom broke, and the kid that ended up happening ended up being his. Immediately once this woman finds out that he is the father, she's basically like, I need a break, you need to take the child, and then she just kind of disappears. What makes matters more stressful is he is dating another girl, and she doesn't know anything about this. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I will read anything that Angie Thomas writes. She has a wonderful way of writing characters who are nuanced and passionate and in these very tough situations, and they just have to figure it out, because you just have to figure it out. And I just, again, absolutely loved this book. Next, we have The Changeling by Victor LaValle, which is the first book I read by him this month. Also, his audiobooks are narrated by him, so if that's a bonus for you, it was definitely a bonus for me. Going into this book, the only thing I knew was the title, and knowing what a changeling is in Irish folklore, I kind of knew what I was getting myself into. We get to see a lot of the background of the upbringing of our main character, and because he didn't really grow up with a father, he feels a little bit out of sorts when suddenly he is going to become a father. He's very excited about it. He's a wonderful father, but then something tragic happens. No spoilers, but from there, shit gets flipped upside down, and then again from there we get this horror supernatural thing that happens. I'm not going to tell you what happens because it's just really good and you should read this book. He has a very strong way of writing characters and circumstances and emotions, and I just very much enjoy this. I want my library to get all of his books so I can read the rest of them. My penultimate book on this list is Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. This book comes with a content warnings page, which it very much needs. This book is about Enchanted Jones, who has always wanted to be a singer, and she kind of cheats her way into getting her mom to take her to this singing competition. At the competition, there is a super mega pop star. He is very well known. She is very enamored with him, and he starts grooming her. That's the only details I'm really going to go into. What I can tell you about this is, even though the subject matter is horrific, I could not put this book down. I thought I was going to start it and then finish it later the next week, and no, I read it again in just a couple of days because I couldn't not know what happened to Enchanted. This has to do with toxic behavior and legal systems and people blaming people that shouldn't be blamed, and it's just incredibly powerful, and I'm so glad that Zoe sent it to me as my Secret Santa gift last year because I needed to read it, and just wow. I went back and forth as to if that should have been my best book of the month or this next one, and really they're probably about the same, but because I have to pick one of them to go last, my last one is Roman and Jewel by Dana L. Davis. This is pitched as Romeo and Juliet gets the Hamilton treatment, and that is a perfect way to get me to read a book. Our main character of this book has been to several auditions for this new play that is coming out, Roman and Jewel, which is based on Romeo and Juliet. It is a new show that will be appearing on Broadway. It is a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but set to music in the current day. And the brilliant thing about this book is not only is the theatrical production a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, the book itself is also a retelling of Romeo and Juliet. I have a theater background, so I'm an absolute sucker for anything that has to do with performance and theater and dance and all of those types of things. In addition, I'm a sucker for books, so books that have to do with books, and because this is based on a play that I'm sure all of us know about, obviously this is both of those things. It is because of this book that I recently asked for people to give me their recommendations about theater books, so that is a recommendation video that will be coming out hopefully pretty soon. If you want to hear me talk more about these books, or other books for that matter, the link to my weekly entertainment playlist is always linked down below. Have you read any of these books? Let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you're on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that is down below, as well as a link to my PayPal and my Amazon wishlist in case you would like to buy me a book. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!